Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about how to Ttap a prompt. So what we have in front of us here is an example of a prompt. So the prompt says, write an informational essay about the relationship between clothing styles and developments in clothing creation. Your essay must be based on ideas, concepts, and information from the Clothing Over Time passage set. So we haven't looked at the passage set yet, but in order to do this, it really doesn't matter if we can Ttap from the very beginning, and it's probably better to Ttap from the very beginning and then go back and look at the passage set later, because we want to know what we're reading for. Like, what is it that we're actually looking for whenever we read. So let's just go through Ttap just super quick. So the first T is type. The first T is type. So what I want to know with type is, what essay type am I looking at? So I would look at the prompt again closely, and it says at the beginning, it says write an informational essay about the relationship between clothing styles and development. So I know that the type here, is informational. Now what does that mean for you? Well, it means for you that I don't have to worry about a counter argument here. I don't have to worry about argumentation at all. I don't have to worry about trying to prove a point that I want a reader to believe, or an action that I want a reader to take. I simply have to support a central idea. Now, for you specifically, that may mean you may be able to get this done in 2 body paragraphs as opposed to 3, as long as they're good. However, if you can get 3 strong body paragraphs in there, that's better. Okay, that's better to have 3 body paragraphs in there. But I at least know that it's informational, so I could do 2 if I needed, and I want 3 if I can, but I'm a little more open here. The only other thing I have to worry about with informational is I don't want to take a side. So if I start taking a side and saying something declarative, like something is wrong, or something is stupid, or something shouldn't be done, then the reader's going to feel me tilting toward a claim that I don't really want to make here. I don't want to make a claim. So knowing that it's informational limits me in some very specific ways. Okay? So type, informational. The second T is task. The second T is task. And task simply means, what am I having to do? Or what do I actually have to do here? Okay? So it says informational. So I got essay about the relationship between clothing styles and developments in clothing creation. Okay? So task is basically, I'm going to be explaining, because it's informational, I'm going to be explaining the relationship between clothing style and creation. I'm scrunching it all up there because I run out of room. But explaining the relationship between clothing style and creation. That's my job. Style and creation. Relationship. Now, relationship basically means that there is something. And be careful when you think about relationship in terms of your prompt, because relationship means that it's a logical relationship. So as one thing, like a style does something, creation may do something, or vice versa. That they have an effect one upon the other. So whenever I'm trying to discuss a relationship, relationship may mean a lot of different things. Relationship may mean, so what is relationship? Relationship may mean cause and effect, right? One causes the other. Relationship may be a comparison, right? One is like the other. It could be correlation, which basically means like one affects the other, but doesn't necessarily cause another thing to happen. It interacts with another in some way. So one may not lead the other in a correlation. They may be kind of moved together at the same time. And there's, they may have a contrasting relationship, to kind of go off of comparison. There's a lot of different relationships that may happen there. So if you're asked to talk about a relationship on the FSA, understand that there's a bunch of different relationships that could be happening. There could be a chronological relationship, right? One could happen right before another happens in time, not causing the other thing to happen, but simply happening before the other thing happens. So all of these are possible relationships you got to be thinking about. So with your task, I'm explaining a relationship. I've got to be mindful of that. So informational, so no argumentation. I'm explaining relationship, and again that style and creation. Style and creation. What effect do they have? What relationship do they have? How does one impact the other? The A in Ttap is audience. Okay, audience is who am I writing to? Who am I writing to here? Who would actually read this essay in a relationship between clothing styles and development and clothing creation? Who would read this essay? Who would actually bother to do it? Let me just move my sticky up here closer to this prompt so we can kind of maybe look at both at the same time. All right, so who would actually bother reading this? And this is always speculative. I mean, there's not a guy, right? There's like, Bob Johnson in, Massachusetts. We don't know that. We don't know exactly who the guy is, but we know what type of person. We know what type of person may read this. So if you're worried about developments in style and creation, you might be a historian, right? You might be a historian just kind of looking at how these things impact each other. You may be a fashion person. It's like some of these people that we see in Hollywood or whatever on these shows that are kind of into fashion. You may just be someone who is kind of curious about how things work. So, why do we need to know the audience? Well, we need to know the audience because we need to know who to talk to, especially whenever we try to grab or whenever we try to clinch. Like, who are we actually trying to get to? So if it was, for example, someone who was a historian versus someone who was in fashion, and by the way, you could write to either of these people. It's kind of your choice which audience to pick of the people who would be interested. But if it was a historian, they may be curious in a different way than someone who is in fashion. Someone in fashion may be looking at it in a more artistic way. They may want you to talk about the way things look, the way things interact with the functionality of what people have to deal with in everyday life. Whereas a historian may just be interested in the relationship itself, like what caused what to happen, or how did this fashion thing impact other avenues of history. So that would be a different take, and depending on your background knowledge, depending on what you could kind of speak to as a writer, the audience here would change the tone of your paper a little bit. And either one would be right. There's no right way to do it, but you don't want to talk to a construction worker necessarily about this, unless a construction worker is going to wear clothes that specifically impact the function of his or her job, right? So that may be, like hard hat construction. We don't know what's in the passage set yet, but we know that we're not just talking to anybody about this. We're talking to a certain segment of the population. So that's going to affect how I couch my argument, or not my argument, but my explanation, how I try to open up and grab the attention. And it also impacts this, P in the Ttap. What is my purpose for reading? Okay, not just overall purpose, but what is my purpose for reading? That's all the time we have today. No, that's a joke. That's a bad teacher joke. All right, so what is the purpose for reading? Okay, now it's really simple. It's really simple. My purpose for reading is to try to find, I want to find evidence. I want to find evidence that speaks to both style and creation. So if I get into a paragraph and that paragraph starting to talk about, like, hey, we started making corduroy pants in 1930 or something like that, that may be something I really want to know. I want to know. I would probably underline, or I would probably mark that, or I'd highlight if we were doing it on the computer like we would do on the FSA. I would highlight that information that we started making corduroy in 1930s, because there may be some impact between the style and creation. There may be some relationship there that I could get into. And so anything that speaks to that, or style, women started wearing flower hats in 1956, right? I want to know those details because I can use those details to tease out the relationship, okay? I could tease out the relationship. And so now that I've T-tapped the prompt, I know the type of essay I've got to write. I know it's informational. I'm not arguing here. There's no one to disagree with me. I know the task. I'm trying to explain the relationship, and I know that there's several different relationships that could be happening if I've got to explain a relationship. I know who the audience might be. It could be a historian. It could be someone who's in fashion. It could be just a curious person, right? It doesn't matter, but it's got to be someone who would actually read this. And I know the purpose for reading. I've got to find evidence that speaks to style. Like, what kind of things were they wearing? And then creation, when did certain kind of things start being made? All of that is going to impact my understanding of the prompt. So when you read your prompt on the FSA, it is super important that the very first thing you do with your piece of paper, with your scratch sheet of paper that they give you, the very first step you need to take is to Ttap. Ttap the prompt. And you can use this video as a way of kind of practicing this process, with other prompts that I'm going to give you this week and the beginning of next week. Okay, so I hope this was informational, helpful. Email me if you need more stuff. You know how to get me on the school website. But this is how to Ttap a prompt. Goodbye.